Hi, everyone. It's Krista Moore with The Krista Moore Show. I want to thank you so much for joining us today. We have a great topic. And as you know, this is a new way to learn from industry experts and thought leaders. We're going to have a great conversation around a subject that I know many of you will really appreciate. And that is how to make sure that you make the best of your sales calls. No more bad sales calls. So that's certainly one thing we're going to be talking about. I wanted to introduce to you my guest today. Her name is Lisa Magnuson, and she has her own business. She's been carrying the bag in sales for a lot of years. She has experience working for Xerox, which I'm very impressed by how you actually were in the field. So when I meet consultants and coaches and authors on sales, I just love it that they actually carried that bag and they know what it's like to be on the other side. So I appreciate you sharing your insights with us today. Hi, Lisa.
Hi, Krista.
Hey, I wanted to make sure that you gave our audience a good background on yourself. Just do an introduction. That'd be great. And then we'll dive into the subject.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. I really spent my entire career in sales. Started out selling. I've been a sales rep, a sales specialist, a sales manager, a sales VP for multiple companies. And I started my company, Top Line Sales, about 15 years ago. And so still in sales.
Yeah.
When I kicked off a training, I don't like to spend a lot of time on my background, but, the one thing that I do tell the group is, I'm talking about stuff that I actually did, today, yesterday, last month, because I actually get involved with my clients with their biggest deals. So, I don't just teach or coach, I'm in it with them day in, day out.
Yeah, I was really impressed with your model when we first met, because what you're doing is you are actually working hand in hand with the client on helping them close big deals.
I do.
And sometimes, coaching and consulting can be perceived as more hands-off, but you are working and helping them through these deals. I think you were telling me about some large ones that you had just recently closed. Now, I want to talk about this whole idea of preparing for the sales call and pre-call planning. I consider you an expert on this. You've written a lot of articles, you speak around it, you have a book on it. Why don't you just give us maybe a high-level overview, and then we can dive into some of the potential tools that they could use. What would you say when you're asked that question, what is this pre-call planning all about?
Yeah, that's a great question. And a lot of times I will ask groups, before I answer that question, I'll ask groups, when you think about pre-call planning, what does that mean to you? And I've gotten some really funny answers over the years.
Yeah.
But two common answers are that I get all the time is, salespeople think that pre-call planning is just doing their research or having an agenda. Those are the two things that people really think about when they think about what pre-call planning is. And those are two really important components, but I would add more to that to really, really, really capture what a great call is. If you just add a little bit more to those two things, you can get a big bang for your buck.
Well, yeah, and let's just take those two things for a moment too. We say that you need to do the research and have an agenda, but how can you take just those thoughts and really kind of blow them up and really make sure that they become common practice and essential to do prior to the sales call?
Yeah, doing research is easy today, and if you're planning for just a call that's just kind of a standard call, it doesn't take a long time to do a quick website search, any recent news, LinkedIn, common contacts, just some of the basics. But I really recommend going a lot further than that in terms of pre-call planning. So once you sort of have those basic research, you've done that basic research, then you really want to kind of go through a systematic thought process before you plan your agenda. And that includes, really thinking about what is what's going to make this meeting good for the customer? Why did they agree to meet with you? What value are they looking to get? And really put yourself in the customer's shoes and think about, what are they expecting? What's gonna be valuable for them? And then thinking about, what do you really want to accomplish for the meeting? Why did you set up the meeting? And really think about, sort of what you're hoping to get from the meeting. And then, there's steps beyond that. But that's, to answer your question, to kind of connect the research and the agenda. There's some things that have to happen in between those. And there's one principle I'll share with your group, the Goldilocks principle for doing research. Not too little, not too much, just right. If you're going to meet with an executive, you're going to do a lot more research than just you're going to do for a normal sales call.
I just thought of something. I remember when the internet was just becoming available for salespeople, right, to do the research on these companies. Yeah. Before that, it was very difficult to learn or understand anything about them. And I remember one of the first times that I did that research, I printed out like their website content and a press release and some news on them. And I intentionally went on this call with it like right there in front of me. I didn't have to say, oh, I did all this research. They could see it. And that in itself, I think, was pretty cool because they saw me coming, not wasting their time, that I did my homework in advance, and that it was going to be a professional meeting. Yeah. And I just thought of that. I remember that exact moment when I saw them notice that I had it together, like I done my research.
Well, remember, I started with Xerox, so all of our meetings started with reams of paper on the table. All lots of paper being copied. But today it's you still want to have that aha moment where the customer realizes that you did your research, and so instead of that stack of paper proving it. You're going to prove it through really good questions that aren't basic, that build on what you learned. Questions like, when I was looking at your website, I saw, this, and this, what does that really mean? What does that mean for your company?
Yeah, or I read an article that was in the Journal 2 weeks ago about the fundraiser that you're having, or, just acknowledging that you're up to speed with what's going on in their world, and the question not to ask is, which was like the worst question you could ask, which is, so, what do you do here?
Yeah, can you tell me about your company?
Yeah, tell me a little bit about your company. Yeah, I mean, that's going to certainly give them a perception of you as a salesperson if anything like that would come out of your mouth, right?
Well, as an example, my latest book is on executive engagement, and in every chapter in that book, I interview an executive, and I ask them different questions, but the basic format of the questions that I asked all of them was, why would you take a call with a salesperson? Mm-hmm. What would make that call valuable? And what would have to occur during the call to have you to agree to another meeting with them?
Okay, so I want to know what the answers are to those three questions, and I'm sure so does our audience. So why don't you repeat them again and give us your answers?
Basically, I think there's, 10 or 11 chapters in the book. So 10 or 11 executive perspectives that say, why would you meet with a salesperson? Why would you accept a meeting? What would make that meeting valuable for you? And what would have to occur during the meeting for you to agree to meet with that salesperson again? And the reason why I share that is because it builds on what we're talking about with research and preparing for calls, pre-call planning. It builds on all that, because what they said is, that time that you spend with that executive, the whole time has to be insightful for them and valuable. So in a normal call, you might get away with being able to share a couple insights or ask some insightful questions. But with an executive, they expect the entire meeting to be insightful for them.
Yeah, so
And
give me some examples of that. And the reason that I ask that is a lot of salespeople that are watching this show are being asked to start selling at a higher level and get those meetings with those executive decision makers, especially in larger organizations, instead of going in on a prospect call necessarily at the ground level.
sure.
So there's a couple of things going on here, right? They're customers of a different level. They expect something different from their salesperson. And what would be some of the common things that you learned through those interviews?
So, when you're doing that research, if you're going to prepare for an executive call, the bottom line is you have to research to the point that you can understand what's important to that executive. So your research doesn't, my Goldilocks principle, the just right for an executive call means that you don't stop doing research until you understand what's important to the person you're going to be calling on. And there's a concept that I call win themes, W-I-N, win themes.
Okay.
And it really helps salespeople kind of get how important it is to kind of zero in on anybody's priorities, but especially an executive. So if you do not do this with an executive, you will not get a second call with them. There's also another thing they told me that was funny. Well, I thought it was funny. It was interesting. The other thing that if you go over your time allocation, you will never get a second call with them. As a matter of fact, what I say in my book is end your meeting early. So if they have 45 minutes, end your meeting at 40. If they have an hour, end at 50 minutes or 55.
And that the other thing I'm thinking about too, Lisa, is that goes without saying, when you're setting that agenda at the beginning of the call, you confirm with them that, I'm only going to take 30 minutes, or is that okay with you?
Yeah.
So I think knowing in advance, and then like you're saying, exceed those expectations, surprise them, and wrap it up earlier instead of taking advantage of them in any way.
And I was calling on an executive recently and followed my own advice, ended the meeting early, and then I pointed it out. I go, oh, look, 5 minutes early. You have five extra minutes you didn't expect. And she's like, I read that in your book.
Yeah, you might not be able to get away with that.
It was a customer, they had given out the book to the whole sales organization, but it was still an executive call. Yeah. And so that was pretty funny. She kind of called me on that. But the concept of win themes really helps with any pre-call planning, but especially executive. So what that concept is trying to figure out the intersection between your prospect or your customer's priorities and your strengths as a company. It could be your products and services strengths as a company, but your strengths. So the opposite of that would be talking about all the things that you can do. That's the opposite of win themes. And so when you really zero in on that executive's priorities, and when I say priorities, it could be goals, it could be objectives, it could be their vision alignment, it could be their projects. I'm using priorities in a broad sense. But when you have a clear understanding of what those are, and then how you can impact those, so that's your company's strengths, that intersection, that's where the win themes are.
Yeah. I'm going to add to that, and I didn't read the book, but I want to. But let me just say that when you use that win theme, I'm going to add something to it, and you may use this may be what you use as well, because I learned it a long time ago. But what win stands for is what's important now. And if you focus on what's important now, that's a good way to remember that's a priority. What's important now to them, if you focus on what's important now, then you'll be winning, right? So that I'm just going to add that little analogy to your win themes.
Yeah, I like that a lot. It's not, you didn't, that's not in my book.
I'm giving you permission to use that.
Okay. No, it's good, and you're exactly right. So literally that agenda, you ask, how do you provide value in an executive meeting for the entire meeting? The answer to that question is you do enough research to figure out those priorities, whatever you have to do, figure out those priorities, and then the entire agenda is focused there. There's no generic about presentation, like about me or about my company. That just doesn't have a place in an executive meeting.
Yeah.
It's the whole conversation, the whole agenda is focused
It's
on those
about
twin
them.
themes.
Mhm. You know,
About the
I
win
want to add, something there too, because when we talk about their priorities and their needs, what if you can't discover that in research? What advice would you give?
You know, I have found that you can discover that. And it gets back to what you said about, it's so different today than it used to be. So, if you really dig on a website or in other, if you have access to other, good sources of information about companies, even private companies, you can find, press releases, communications. I have a meeting this afternoon, a war room meeting with one of my clients, and they sent their research, their background, and they have an opportunity to meet with the CEO of one of their prospects. And so we're doing exactly that. We are digging to figure out what is important. And I had to dig through like 20 pages of kind of website documents. But I finally found a couple things that really pointed to the priorities. And like as an example, in this case, the CEO had been the CFO, so it's a new CEO, only been in place for about a year. One of the first things he did was he did an employee survey, and it was a big deal. It was like he mentioned this in a public communication. So obviously, one of his big priorities are his employees.
Mm-hmm.
And then there was other things, but so it wasn't obvious, but with a little digging, you really can find out what those priorities are. And it's also, you don't want to go in just assuming. The first thing you're going to do is test them. So, you can go in and say, well, it sounds like what's really important to you right now is employee satisfaction. I saw this communication, you've done this employee survey, is that still a priority for you?
Yeah, bingo. That's a great example, Lisa, because I think that most salespeople, and I'm speaking and generalizing here, when they think of priorities or objectives of the buyer, they automatically are thinking about their own product.
Right.
What are the objectives and the priorities when it comes to business supplies?
Right.
Not in their world. So I want to add to this discussion, when you're thinking about objectives and priorities and circumstances and, what's important now, think of their industry.
Right.
Think of them financially. Think of them as business executives trying to run a company. What's important to them now, unrelated to your product.
Totally unrelated. And
yeah.
I really don't like that. What keeps you up at night? That's whenever it has been going around forever.
Don't
it's
ask
not
that question.
Yeah,
I'm advising don't ask that question. They're typing that question.
That's a terrible question. But what was I going to say? When we work with really big opportunities, and that's generally my war room work with clients, where we've identified really big whale opportunity. We put together a strategy brief. And to your point about people really kind of getting stuck in the world that they sell in,
Mm-hmm.
I used to just have in my strategy brief, a place for the results of your research. But in subsequent versions, I've actually divided that into two sections. What's important to the company at the top level, and then what's important in the world that you live in, whatever you call it.
We do something very similar. That's interesting, because you do need to, there's two different conversations. It doesn't mean that one switches to you, but it's more, what are their needs and their priorities as it relates to their business and what you sell.
Right.
But
And
but but make sure you're talking about their business, especially with the executive, because that's what he cares about. And when you referred to, you used the word insights, and that what they want is insights. I'd like to maybe have you describe that a little bit better for our audience. And well, how I heard that is they don't want to be bored. They
right.
want to be challenged, or they want to learn. They want it to be worth their time. And if you're sharing something of value that's going to help them achieve their objective that has
Yeah.
nothing to do with your product,
Right.
then that's how I see insights. But
Yeah.
maybe you can explain it different.
No, you're exactly right. And you can connect it to your products and services. They understand that you're there and you're a salesperson, but an example of an insight could be, you might call on other companies that are similar to theirs. Might be other companies in their same industry, might be other companies of a similar size and structure. It could be anything, and so you might kind of share with them what you've seen in other companies. So let's say that you're calling an executive, with this win themes, you've identified that employee satisfaction, like the example I gave earlier, is one of his or her top priorities. Well, you could ask a question about that, an insightful question, but you could also say, it's interesting that's one of your priorities. We're seeing this, and this at other companies. Are you thinking about those things at all?
Yeah.
So that's, you don't always have to be sharing insights. You can ask insightful questions that cause that executive to go, you know what? We haven't thought about that, and
Yeah.
maybe we should.
It's almost a coaching conversation at that point, right?
Yeah. The other thing is, so same example, the executive, one of the priorities is employee satisfaction. Well, maybe this is a current customer and you would like to sell more to them. And so you're establishing this relationship with this executive. Well, one of the things that would be valuable to that executive in that scenario is sharing things that his employees are doing that are really impactful.
Yeah.
And so, that is providing value. Yeah, they don't know. And you might be really helping your main contacts, your day-to-day contacts, by saying, yeah, you might not know it, but so and so has kind of done this, and this, and it's really making a difference in that department. And that's insightful and valuable to an executive.
Yeah.
Especially,
I think those examples are good, and I appreciate you sharing that. One thing that we talk an awful lot about at K Coaching is, after you've discovered, what they're through your research, then it's like, okay, what challenges are they having as an organization in meeting some of their goals or their objectives, understanding their challenges. And I would assume that that's part of your process as well.
Yeah. So when I, like specific to kind of the concept of win themes, when I say priorities, it would include their challenges. So, sometimes a priority can be going after a new market, or, doing more with what they have, but sometimes it can be a big challenge, shoring up something that isn't working. They have a sales organization that's not performing. That's a challenge, and it's also a priority.
Yeah.
So I don't exclude in the relentless efforts to understand their priorities. It would include both opportunities and challenges.
Yeah, and I'm thinking the next thought process is when you're giving a proposal, right? Or now it's time to solve their problem or give them a solution, however you want to phrase that. It is about reminding them and reiterating back how your solution is going to help them meet their objective. But you almost have to connect those dots
You do.
throughout the sales process. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, I agree completely. You have to connect those dots. And, I have I actually have a funny story around proposals.
Go ahead, tell us.
So I have a rule with my clients. I'm like, you cannot send your proposal, without an appointment to go through it. Can't send it. And so I had this one client, they're out of Boston, and over the years, it's like he's like, I go, what happened with your proposal? Well, they haven't made a decision, they haven't done anything. Well, so we peeled back the onion. Turns out he sent the proposal and nothing happened. And that just kept happening. So I said to my client, I go, okay, if you send the proposal without an appointment to go through it again, we're done. Like, that's it. And so flash forward to the next scenario. He had a proposal. It was successful. I go, okay, well, what happened? He goes, well, they wanted me to send it, but I told them that my coach said that if I did send it, that we were done. So I can't send it.
So he blamed you, but it worked.
Why me? He threw me under the bus.
But he got the appointment, and he probably
Finally,
closed, right?
but it took so long. I think we went through that for a long time.
I really like the story because it's not uncommon for
It's not uncommon.
for in the sales process that when it comes down to okay, now I'm going to give you the proposal.
Yeah.
Sometimes that proposal is just prices instead of a written proposal along with, oh, by the way, here's how much it's going to cost kind of thing. And so we train and teach, we try and make sure that sales reps are recognizing the importance of presenting the proposal, reminding them how it's going to meet their needs or have this impact on their business. And oh, by the way, here's how much it's going to cost. So the emphasis is more on solving a challenge or a problem than it is necessarily on them again and what the price of it is. It's like
Absolutely
reiterating the value.
Yeah.
I would say that is almost a best practice to include that in your sales process, just like you did as the coach. Do not send out a proposal through the mail or email. You've got to do it in person.
Yeah.
And I'm speaking to sales leaders and business owners in the audience right now. Do not let your salespeople present a proposal through email without having a meeting set up.
Well,
and I guarantee it'll improve the close rates, right?
You can't break the law. It's a law.
That's right. And blame it on your boss. My boss said that I can't.
Krista said.
Yeah, I was listening to the Krista Moore show, and here's what she said. No, that's funny. Hey, I knew this time was going to go fast because we have one in common in our passion for what a difference it could make in a whole sales process or presentation or trying to get the appointment if you have more of this pre-call planning. So I appreciate that.
Absolutely.
One thing I want to ask you though before we go, I know that you've done a lot of research recently, and I think you've interviewed over 40 VPs of sales, and you're gathering kind of your findings, and I just wanted you to give us a sneak peek at what some of those findings were before we let our audience go.
Yeah, I actually interviewed 41 VPs of sales, live interviews, and I asked them about their goals, their challenges, and a lot more. And, one of the findings was a little bit alarming. So my whole niche is around these big deals. And what I really found is there's an alarming gap between the skills and expertise and ability of the sales leadership team, the VP, the managers, and the selling team, the account managers, the account executives. And it was significant. And what that really means is that if for these big opportunities, these whale opportunities, if the sales manager or the sales VP is not involved, then it's probably not going to progress and close.
Yeah.
And so the leaders become kind of a single point of failure. And one of the reasons for that is because they have so many challenges that they're dealing with. They actually have twice as many challenges as they have goals. And that was another finding. So the findings were really interesting. Very current, just finished with that. And
Yeah, and it's so relevant that even if salespeople are reading it, they're understanding their boss a little bit better.
yeah,
um, but what I heard you refer to, we call it executive sponsorship, and and these big deals that you're working on with your clients, or if there is a big deal that anyone in the audience is working on now, having that executive sponsor, having them involved is essential.
yep,
And often the boss is the actual business owner, and them being that close to the client and the potential deal is really important. So
yeah, yeah.
yeah,
I mean,
not alone. Mm-hmm.
you need an executive sponsor on both sides. If it's a big deal, you need a customer executive sponsor, and then you need an executive sponsor in your own company
Mm-hmm.
for many, many reasons.
Well, there's no need to do it alone. I mean, there's no need to do it alone as a seller today.
Right, right. And you shouldn't really.
Thank you. Well, I'm going to share some contact information so that our audience can reach out to you, get connected with you. And I wanted you to, I know you've got some free resources that are available for the pre-call planning process that you use. And I just wanted to make sure that we made that available to our listeners.
Yeah. So, I would point people to my website, www.toplinesales.com. They can sign up for my free newsletter, just comes out once a month. But there's two things they can download. They can download my pre-call plan, and I know your customers have access to your pre-call plan as well.
Right.
And I am only a fan of doing the pre-call planning. Pick the form that works best for you and use it. Because that's what makes the difference. But I do have one on my site that they could access as well. And then I have the infographic that shows all the findings from those 41 VP interviews. And I think that would be informative for VPs, company owners that run sales, and salespeople.
Yeah, that's great. So we have that slide up there. They can make a note of that. And also, I know you're active socially if they want to connect with you on LinkedIn, yeah, and also on your Facebook.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Great. I knew we'd have a great conversation, Lisa, and I really appreciate you taking the time to spend it with this audience. And take care, and we'll talk to you soon.
Okay, thank you so much.
I wanted to also just mention something to the group. For those of you that are listening to this show, and if you have access to ID Growth Sales Vault, there is something called an opportunity plan, which is very similar to a pre-call planning format, available in the Changing Conversations training. So if you don't know what I'm talking about, give us a call and we'll direct you. But there's a lot of resources you can download. And like Lisa said, it doesn't matter which one you use or any ones that you use, as long as you use it. So I hope that was a takeaway for you today. Now, next week on our show, it's going to be quite interesting, a little bit of a shift. I'm interviewing Krista Moore. Not this Krista Moore. There's another Krista Moore, spelt the same. She actually lives in Canada. Lovely, lovely lady. I came across her years ago, and I finally connected with her, and she is going to be talking to us on a more spiritual level. She's going to be talking to us about hope. And it's a shift, I know. It's not about sales, but we all could use a little hope in our worlds. So I hope you can join me as Krista Moore meets Krista Moore next Wednesday. And here at K Coaching, we care about your success, and I'm glad you're joining the Krista Moore Show. Take care.